Hello and welcome back to the podcast. So today we've got a really interesting guest. So actually, I think you guys have probably met Michael already. So he's been on the podcast, I think 3 or 4 times at this point. But specifically, kind of the subtext or the premise of this episode is that I'm interested in potentially learning Python. And I reached out to Michael, who's getting a PhD in machine learning for finance. And he was telling me that apparently ChatGPT is a really effective and easy way to go about learning that. So me and Michael are going to catch up a bit. We're going to jump into ChatGPT and how to leverage it as a learning tool. And then we've also got my marketing manager, and we're going to pull Carly on, and we're going to kind of walk through how we're currently leveraging AI to synthesize this beast of a podcast. So I think we have around 220 to 250 hours worth of content, and we're using AI to start to clip the podcast. So let's go ahead and pull on Michael. Michael, how's it going?
Good. It's been a while. I thought, you didn't like talking to me anymore.
Well, okay. We have talked on the phone because I think I called you. I was down in Playa del Carmen in Mexico.
Yeah, that was a while ago still. That was like 6 months ago, man.
Yeah, that's true. Well, to give you a life update, I'm now working full-time at the Fresh Market as a category analyst.
Mm-hmm.
Still earning kind of the passive revenue through Silvertone Analytics.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm starting to work with a former student of mine who is kind of working as like my marketing analyst, and then Carly, who's kind of in the studio back behind scenes, is working as my marketing manager.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because I think you want me to dig into my finances. This is not Caleb Hammer.
It's not, but no, we don't have to.
But yeah, so well, it's actually a pretty timely topic because we're in the second week of class, and I literally wrote out $32,000 on the board, and the students, and I was like, hey, what does that number mean? And I Googled what's the average income for an individual in Greensboro, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And that's what it was. And then we went through like, all right, we got to take out. It's funny because one of my students is working part-time as an accountant. He's like, well, you would pay 14.57% taxes. And then we like did the math. And then we looked at, how much does it cost to rent, a 1-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. And then it was like, after all the expenses, you have like, I don't know, $500 for everything after insurance. But yeah, because I think we talked on the phone because while I was running the business and making a lot of money, I had also racked up credit card debt. Mm-hmm. Which like I hate that they shut down Mint, mm-hmm. the financial app, because like it consolidated all of my finances in one spot. And just out of curiosity, I like looked at how much total interest I had paid, and it was $8,000 over the last 15 years. Yeah. I mean, and that's not even including like the SBA loan that I pulled out and then my student loans. That's just credit card debt. So maybe that's a little bit more effective way of doing like a personal finance lecture and like making it a little bit more real of like, don't be me. This is what I did. I'm fortunate now in that like I'm living off of like 40 to 50% of my take home after the passive revenue and the one I'm earning as a oh man, why am I blanking right now?
You don't know your
job category title? Analyst. Man. What?
You don't know your job title? Really?
I wear multiple hats. Carly was saying that she can't even keep it straight like everything I'm doing right now. Well, what's your job title?
So technically, I'm a PhD student at Georgia Tech.
Technically.
So I went for a little bit of a different path than, data scientist or developer relations or, Python instructor. I still teach a lot, honestly. I still teach on the side. But I've always wanted to go back and do my PhD, but I never knew what in until recently. So it's been a experience.
It's been an experience. Like, what is that?
So like
a good
on my
experience?
Fitbit today. I mean, actually, I'm not going to see on the camera, so I guess it doesn't matter. But like sleep wise, let me see what I did last night. I got 4 hours and 1 minute of sleep. I had a 58 sleep rating and poor sleep. It's not usually that bad, but it's a lot, but it's probably the most fun I've had, which normally PhD students are not super happy.
So what's the end goal? Like, is there a specific job you have in mind, or?
So for me, it's more like a lifelong thing I want to do. But what I've also discovered in my time in industry is that I have a very, very wide skill set, like extremely wide, right? I get job offers from startups all the time, and including this week, ironically. But the problem with me is I was so wide because I did a lot of different things. I've taught, I've been a data scientist at, some like research institutions. I've made YouTube videos, LinkedIn Learning, like you.
Tell me that.
It's been a whole thing, but the one thing I've realized is that a lot of companies, because I have such an online presence, or did at least, they'd like me for like marketing roles, and my trajectory really was, VP of marketing, or head of developer relations, or something like that, right? Because a lot of stuff I like to do, I want to be public, right?
Right.
But then I also thought about like long term, I do like sharing work, publicly, but maybe I can try a different way of sharing. Maybe I do some research and then publish it. I still have a lot of papers. I could probably bring my Google Scholar in the comments or whatever if people want, but I just want to try a different way of sharing for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best way to explain it.
Yeah, that makes sense, because that's what I have noticed as far as like the social media landscape goes, is that me and John Paul were actually talking about this, who's the chief revenue officer of Maven Analytics. There seems to be like a person who's looking for a job, makes LinkedIn posts, gets traction, becomes an influencer, gets said job, then quits said job after a year. And then like it's like this whole like circular thing to where they're not, I don't know, there seems to be a pretty big chasm between those who are popular online and those who are doing really good work. Like there's not, like if you're an analytics manager, or you're like high up, or you're doing like, really cool like senior data roles, you're not on LinkedIn all the time. You're doing the work.
Yeah, that's basically how it is. It's also the what got you traction online is not necessarily what get you traction at a job, right? Because if you're doing things online, typically you're not always selling something. You're doing typically for free or nearly free. Like YouTube ad revenue is not going to like get you everything, right? Especially if it's like something specialized, like getting a job, or teaching Python. You can make good money. Some people really do, but there's easier ways to make money, I guess, is the best way to kind of explain that.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's definitely easier ways to make money, like definitely easier ways. But if you get hired for a job at like, some company, and part of your job is to evangelize the company, like share their work or whatever, you're selling a product. You're not actually doing the same thing that you were doing when you're making content, right?
Right.
It's inherently different.
Yeah. Well, so I guess another thing that I have going on is I joined a analytics career services program. So the former VP of analytics at Nielsen, his name's Solomon Khan, and he started it's called Top Data People. And it's a curriculum. So I'm like watching videos, and like kind of, he's distilled some of his advice as far as navigating your career, and the politics of it is very different than here's how you push this button on Tableau or Power BI or code in Python. Those are two separate things. They're interrelated because you need to be at least over a certain technical threshold to be like in the conversation. But a lot of people who are really good at the technical stuff it's, you know, people and systems and organizations are a lot more complex than, you know, coding and tools and languages.
I really wish people taught that in school.
Yeah.
So I was giving a lecture today, and that's partially why I got like 4 hours of sleep. I was making a lecture last night. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Students are great. But one thing that I didn't think students realized before talking today is that at a company, right, you have to get access to data. And in a bigger company, especially the bigger companies, you have to be friendly with people to get people to, send you data or give you access to data or databases in a timely manner, right? At big places, there's always, and even small places, there's more work than people. So part of life is being friendly enough so that people actually answer your requests.
Right.
If no one wants to work with someone that's unpleasant, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, you know, in a past life, when I was coming out of undergrad, I went directly into 100% commission sales. So I was knocking on doors trying to sell insurance and getting rejected 20 times a day, every day. And then like figuring out how to, you know, they say no, and then you handle that objection, and then turn it into another conversation and then maybe get the yes. There's an art to that I think a lot of technical people, they just assume like, if I'm really good at this, I'm going to have a good career. And it's like, yeah, maybe like you might really be good at Python, but you're an asshole and no one wants to be around you. So they're going to get you out. Well, it's funny because like I was talking to somebody who was in a hiring position, and this person was way overqualified for the job, but then, you know, they wanted specifically to be in Greensboro because they were close to their kids or whatever. And then they passed them to the next round of the interviews, and it was a hard no. And it was interesting because it was like a guy who was an industry veteran within a certain space. But then when he was interviewed by a woman, I think he probably said something like, "Oh, don't you worry, honey," or "Don't worry about that, sugar." Like, and it was like, "Oh, you think you're better than her, and also you've got like this kind of old school mentality." That's a hard no, even though he was like well overqualified for the job.
And that happens a lot, right? It's not uncommon.
Right. So like, I guess just being aware. I mean, also too, with that anecdote in particular, there's also kind of a generational vibe. Like, you know, like being in a traditional business where it's like you sell a physical product. I think there's kind of like a boys culture or a boys club, you know? So like I think that is changing in those spaces, but you know, maybe not. You're shaking your head no. You think it's a boys club with extra steps?
What?
You think it's a boys club with extra steps?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's in some regards it's still a boys club at some places. In some places, the exact opposite. You know, some people correct, and then some people overcorrect, and then some people haven't changed at all. Right? Yeah. I think now there's a lot more variance than there used to be. Before it was like a boys club just about everywhere, and now I think it's gotten better in a lot of places. But then you also have the distribution. It's more like it's becoming more of a flatter curve, if that makes sense. Or even bimodal in nature, right? There's some places that like, people don't even want to hire dudes, right? Like that's far in the extreme, right? And then the other extreme, which is probably still more common, it's definitely more common, is the boys club.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because like I can definitely like bro down. Like if I make a mistake, I can laugh at myself. And I like that happened, last week where I made a mistake, and then I was the butt of the joke for a week. But it was almost like they were testing me to be like, is he going to spaz out in this meeting if we, which is interesting because that is like it's a way that, I mean, a lot of cultures kind of almost self-regulate.
Like every company has its culture, every place has its culture and subcultures, and then like social and moral norms, they differ greatly across companies, cultures, demographics, and that's one interesting thing.
True. All right, so let's get on to the real interesting thing, which is ChatGPT. So I've started messing around with it a little bit, and I even talked about it on probably not the last episode, but the episode before that. I interviewed one of the product developers at Tableau, or one of the former product developers. And generative AI is not to the point where I can say, hey, write an article for me on how to get an analytics job. That being said, and we're going to bring Carly in the conversation, it's really good at curating something that you've already written or already done.
Yeah. That's definitely true. So what would you like me to talk about in particular with GPT, right? Because it's a wide subject. I mean, it's a LM system, right?
What does that mean?
Okay.
The thing is, like,
okay,
I'm an analyst, but I'm like
here. So, let's talk about using, let's call it AI for, coding, or AI to learn to code, or AI to assist in code, right? So, developers that have been in this game for a long time, we've all seen improvements in our productivity, okay? And part of that is that we learn to code without these, let's call them ChatGPT tools. So these tools are typically built off large language models. And what you see in the front end, it's some sort of large language model system. It's like some giant machine learning model served hyper efficiently, and you interact with it, right? And these tools have been, the models behind the tools, I should say, have been trained on, let's say most of the internet, okay? And because they've been trained on a lot of different things for a lot of different tasks, they've been instruction fine-tuned to do well on a lot of things that we would ask them, I guess, and not do things that are inherently evil. We can use them to help us with coding. If we have an error in our Python code, then we can put the error into ChatGPT and as well as our code, and then it can probably tell us the issue with the code, right? And back in the old day, we didn't actually have those options. So,
gotcha. So it's kind of like what I talked about, like how we're leveraging AI for curating the podcast. Like, you wouldn't want AI to create you a coding system that solves your problem. But if it's like the coding language exists, and there are rules and there's syntax and there's kind of like a structure to it, it can go through and like figure out that structure, distill it down, give you what? Am I completely ignorant on this?
No, it's true. It's totally true. I was just thinking, I wonder how it'll affect people that have never coded before, that they've always had access to these tools. And I will get into this later, but if you think about it, right, a lot of people are generating content using AI these days, for lack of a better term. So if we keep on training these models with, let's call it synthetic data, like what are they actually learning at that point, right?
This turtle's all the way down.
It's turtles all the way down, right?
Yeah.
So there's actually research papers about like model collapse, potentially, if you just train your models and update them on synthetic data, which is like largely what a lot of my students' papers can become sometimes. So
that's oddly comforting to me, because in my co-working space, there's a guy who started a marketing AI company. And I remember we were at a dinner party and he was like, you're not going to have a job in 6 months. The AI is going to put you out of business. And then he listed off all of these different, it is an interesting point that we thought AI would probably augment more blue collar jobs, but it turns out low level white collar jobs are being impacted more so right now, right?
Definitely, 100%. If you look at the job market these days, the people that are hiring are not for the super educated college degree jobs, so to speak. A lot of it's part-time jobs that are being hired right now, which is very interesting for the economy.
Yeah. Well, if you want to relate it back to like, will AI replace analytics? Maybe, but I don't think so, because like every company has their own unique data quality issues. And I don't think that AI is going to be able to go in and I'm trying to think through how would it even do that. It would have to reach out to Becky, who works in, pricing, and then Sally, who works in labor relations, and figure out like, well, what's missing in this data source and that data source, and why won't they connect, and blah 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 blah. That is a system that doesn't have like set codified rules.
Yeah. And there's a lot of unwritten rules in society that aren't just written down, right? And the other thing to keep in mind about like AI for individual companies, right, is, and by the way, I say right too much. That's weird. For individual companies, we're also wearing the same shirt. So like how much of a mess, right? And I said that again.
It looks a lot better on you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. But for people at a specific company, they have their own data at that company. For a model to do really well on, let's say, people at company X, it has to be trained on company X's data.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's really good out of the box performance on some tasks that the models generalize really well to. And that's why without putting anything into ChatGPT, you can get a pretty good answer about some pretty generic questions. But then when you get to things that are very specialized, the models typically aren't trained on those super specialized things always, and they don't always perform as well on them.
Right. Well, because within analytics, there's a certain amount of assumptions you have to make.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the AI can't, because I heard somewhere, isn't a lot of it, it's just guessing what the next word is in a lot of situations. Yep. So it's like if
next token. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's just like it's funny because you're like translating my like dumb, like fumbling around.
No, it's not dumb. That's how I talk too.
Well, because I'm starting to like scratch the surface of using AI and starting to see the huge amount of leverage that it can give me. But it seems like it's like laser focused. Like what Carly's starting to do is like use Riverside.fm to like clip the podcast and then add captions. And that's like what it does. But then it's not to the level yet where I can say, all right, well, we're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and like customize them for that. That would be really cool. That's where kind of Carly can come in, throw on a skin, like a template, and then start to put them out that way.
Yeah, I think in general, most AI these days is best as like an assistant.
Mm-hmm.
So
or a co-pilot.
Like, yeah, it's a co-pilot. I mean, it's a great name for a product from Microsoft.
Right.
But that's typically what it'll end up being, because there's a lot of applications where there's too much data for an analyst at any company or any organization to kind of go through. And the person typically knows what to look for in the data, and you can ideally tell a model to perform some task, and doesn't always get it right. So for most of my conversations with ChatGPT 4.0, which is the newest model, the reason why they use 4.0 is actually cheaper than GPT-4. People are very familiar with the LLMs these days for them to run. But typically, if I'm making like a graph or something, I have to give it just the initial task, and then it does something, and I keep on correcting it, and then I get some sort of output. It's really an assistant, but this communication stream between me, the human, and the LLM or the ChatGPT, it's a lot faster if I know what I'm doing. And as models get better and better, hopefully that loop gets quicker. But if it's something very, very specialized, I typically find the model doesn't do very well still.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So could we see some of this in action?
You want me to share my screen?
Yes.
Sure. So
I don't want you to. I need you to.
Fine. Let's share my screen. So the real key is like, let's see if I can actually share my screen. No, one sec. I'm just making sure I don't have anything too personal here. Let me move a tab over. So just give me a sec. I realize I probably should have closed something that's interesting. Okay. So I'm a researcher these days, so I just want to make sure everything was closed. Okay.
Top secret. You got clearance.
Yeah, that's close enough. So I do financial research, specifically NLP for finance. So I wanted to make sure nothing was too crazy, right? So let's see if I have anything that's older. I can scroll down first. So right now, what you're seeing is you're seeing my conversation history with GPT-4o. And by the way, this is just one platform and just one model that I'm using. Even with GPT-4o, there's other models. GPT-4, by the way, actually outperforms GPT-4o in most tasks I've found. It's just that the reason why they recommend this one, from my actual opinion, is that it's cheaper for them to run the models on the back end.
Gotcha.
So I'm going down my list so that I don't share anything that's like research that's coming out today.
Okay.
So I'm just scrolling all the way down. Okay, and then I'll get something. You can see all the things I'm doing though. Okay. Okay. I have some homeworks. Okay, so no surprise to anyone, I had homeworks. So one thing I land up doing is I'm a graduate student at Georgia Tech, which I probably shouldn't be saying. But one thing that I find them doing a lot these days with LLMs is sometimes I see some equation in either a research paper or homework or whatever. And I want to be able to copy this image. So I literally upload an image and tell it to copy the following to LaTeX format. So I can copy this directly into a Jupyter Notebook. And the reason why I want to do this is I want to basically have this equation here and then solve the problem underneath it in Python for like organizational purposes. It's like a really like specific use case, probably just for a PhD, but it's very, very handy because otherwise before I'd have to write this out. And you have to understand that this is actually very, very time consuming to write. I can even let the LLMs have a crack at these problems initially, and they do a pretty good job often. I'm like, okay, now, what's the smallest value of blah? And when is it actually cheapest value? Is it correct? I actually believe this answer wasn't correct back in the day, but I know how to fix it because I have a background in it, right?
Right.
That's one thing I want to really like emphasize here, that for a lot of coding tasks, and this is literally just like, I see an image and then complete it. But now I also want you to, let me see if I have Python on the screen. Yeah. Now we write your answer, blah, blah. And I want you to solve this in Python. So I write this equation, solve it in Python, and it'll give me the Python code to use to solve it. So here's an image. I want you to convert this to LaTeX. If I tell it, solve this problem in the image, it can actually try to do that. But what I often find for these sort of tasks is that it often gets something wrong in the LaTeX when it's trying to use the vision model to convert to LaTeX to then solve it in Python. There's some connections that basically become broken.
What does LaTeX mean?
So are you familiar with Markdown?
No.
Everyone on your podcast?
No, I feel like we're in different worlds. So like I'm in.
So let me show
I've
you
run
my
a consulting agency the last 8 years, but now I'm in merchandising. So what's funny is that everyone is using Excel, and what's funny, not to be harsh, but like they're using Excel unoptimized.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of all over the place. But it's funny because I feel like the relationship of my analytic skills compared to like the typical person there is like the distance from me to you. Like,
no, we're the same technically. I think the one thing people kind of think is that you have to know, like, I'll never catch up to that person in that one specific skill set, right?
Mhm.
John David, you definitely have some skills that I don't have it. We've talked about this before in various podcasts in person and other forums. I lack some basic fundamental skills in like BI tools. I also lack some of the business acumen, which actually does matter, like we talked about earlier. Like,
right. Because
so
I feel like I
you got
identify
that.
more as like I feel like I have a very well-developed business mind. And
Mhm.
then I'm lighter on the technical side, which hasn't really handicapped me because I can just outsource very specific parts of projects
Yeah,
to
of
someone
course.
who is a subject matter expert. Um,
It's
and
really
part of it's like just following your curiosity. Like I think I'm more interested in different types of businesses or different verticals of a business than I am specifically in any coding language.
yeah, of course. It's all about getting the job done.
Right.
And as far as languages on the screen right now, this is HTML. This is Markdown. And by the way, HTML and Markdown are pretty similarly related. In fact, let's actually use an LLM to determine the difference, because personally, when you're learning to code, you're learning to code in Python these days. You're typically learning to code through Jupyter notebooks, which are essentially let's call it a way to interact with Python, execute Python. So when I actually use Jupyter these days, I typically, on the left side of my screen, I have ChatGPT or Llama 3 405B, which is just a different model. And I have Jupyter on the right side. And I'll do that in a second. But you asked like, what is Markdown? And like, we asked what is latex, and I said it's very similar to Markdown. And I'm going to ask actually the LLM for that, because why not, right?
Yeah,
So
let's see what it comes
what
up
is
with.
latex and how is it different from Markdown? Also, why do people commonly use Markdown with Python? Let's call it Python. So these are like the ways people learn, because back in the day, you would have to actually Google this yourself. And then you start off on the Markdown stream, you find out it's close. Sorry, you start with the latex stream, you find out it's close to Markdown, you look up what Markdown is, and you go from there. So latex is typically something that's very academic in nature, but it's used to write equations and academic and scientific writing, especially at big companies these days, the big research institutions like Google, Meta, et cetera have. We can write a lot of different equations. So, but what they didn't do over here is they didn't actually show examples of latex.
So are you sharing your browser or the full
Sorry.
screen?
And again, this is also the thing, like tools are only as intelligent as the people that use them, right? So I didn't actually share my screen. So I went to ChatGPT-4 and then wrote this out, and they gave me some result about latex, but it didn't actually show an example of latex. So I'm gonna be like re-answer the same question, but show examples in code cells of both latex and Markdown.
All right. Related to like what we're using, we got a user or fan question. Do either of you utilize R or RStudio?
So I could share my screen. I do use R occasionally.
Yeah.
And it's still used in finance. But what I found the last couple of years is R is used a little bit less than Python these days, and even so much so that RStudio has been renamed as a company. So
Really?
yeah, let me actually share a new tab. So
yeah, let's go down this
I
rabbit
know
hole.
Googling is not the most interesting thing, but people do in movies all the time. Rename company, because I think they thought it was better for business. So even when I type this into Google now, they have an AI generated response. So RStudio rebranded to pause in November 2022. So
right.
And it's to represent the company's expansion to Python and VS Code, like to represent the business as a whole.
Right, because R is very specialized. Python is a much wider program, right?
Yeah, and that's a really big thing. So if the person wants to follow up about like why you use R or why Like why you ask it, but R is still very valuable for statistics. It has the best statistics packages, and that's actually very valuable. And a lot of things that have been written are fantastically written. But the problem that people come into in industry sometimes is that we started out a couple of years ago with, let's say not a couple of years ago, but deep learning has been around a long time, but it's gotten more and more popular. And that's led to applications like ChatGPT, right? And then the one thing that's ended up happening, you had more and more data, and Python became the de facto language to interact and train large language models, essentially. So all the big libraries to train models these days, the most popular APIs are in Python. So PyTorch, TensorFlow, which is a little bit less popular these days, their most popular APIs are in Python.
Gotcha.
So as that became more popular and data science became more popular, Python's grabbed more of the market. Doesn't mean there's not a place for R, and there always will be, by the way.
So
But,
Christopher's saying, I'm actually a geography graduate student and you utilize R heavily for large data sets, filtering, as well as generating summary statistic tables.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my friend Kinga, she works as, well, she's an interesting story in that she was an environmental professor. So she's taught environmental science and then got burnt out on that. And also too, I didn't realize that professors in different departments get paid less. So like business professors get paid a lot. People in like history or math, maybe, I don't know, other departments get to paid way less, to where she pivoted from that into becoming a data scientist for a flood risk startup, doubled her salary in just one fell swoop, which that is insane. I didn't realize about, I guess, the environment out there, because number one, professor jobs are like really sought after, and they're also very expensive to get all the education and time consuming. So it's like the switch, like the opportunity cost is very
huge.
high. Right. And the thing is, like, they're giving out less and less tenure, right?
Yeah, of course. Part of that is that we're a smaller generation, or at least we're not having a lot of kids in our generation.
Right.
So there's that. There's budgetary issues. It's also that they don't think they have to give out tenure. So they're not going to a lot of places. But you're very right about the business and the finance professors making the most.
Yeah, because I went to UNCG, where Carly's at right now. And yeah, we looked up one of our professors who's making like $160,000 a year, which for Greensboro is a lot of money.
Yeah. If you Google me and you find out who I work for, you'll find out just how much the finance professors at my school make. Let's put it that way. It's a lot more than that.
Well, so Georgia Tech, that's in Atlanta, right?
Atlanta, yeah.
Yeah. Which I've gone through Atlanta. I've been there like once or twice, specifically Buckhead. It's so much more expensive there than Greensboro is like a tertiary city. There's 300,000 people here. It's so cheap compared to. You're smiling. What?
Yeah, that's true. It's more expensive here, but just know that professors
are making like
a lot of universities make a lot of money. Yeah. Not just Georgia Tech or USC or University of Washington. I'm just naming random schools here. The professors make a lot of money in certain departments.
Yeah. Well, so my sister is a director over at Duke, and she was putting her position because there was that huge scandal a few years back where they were fabricating data. So she's like running the data ethics board or something like that. So with that, like, huge it's almost like acting or something like that, where it's like there's so many people pursuing it, and then at the top it's like exponentially more. But we're getting totally sidetracked because people want to listen to us talk about. So the question
again, let's go.
So okay, so the question that I wanted to ask, and we don't have to solve this, but it's like, I think it would be insightful for you to show me how you would think about this. So I'm interested in building out a price elasticity model.
Okay.
So yeah, so like if you could just like, because I've done it dug into it myself, and I'm curious if what I found is different than what you found. So
Okay,
let me go ahead and
so
play you then.
the one thing I try not to start on an LLM, but
Okay.
I can do that as well. So let's start off with GPT-4 and
Gotcha. Here, can I pause you right fast? So Christopher's got another question for you.
sure.
Are there specific benefits to utilizing Python as opposed to R?
So let's actually ask the LLM here because we keep on going back and forth. Let's ask
Okay.
the LLM and I'll see if I actually agree with the answer.
Okay.
So,
I'll pull that back in.
and is this the same person?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Christopher Lucero. And he says, I've always been told to use R as it is better at handling larger data sets.
And this is for what kind of
Geography.
research?
So he's a geography graduate student.
So, like anything, right? I'm a source. The people around you are sources for information, and it's up to you to determine who's the good source and who's also the good source for the time being. Who's a good source for industry? It all depends on what you're doing. So, if you've been in a research lab for a long time, they have a lot of code on your version control system, and it's all in R. Well, why reinvent the wheel? Why remake everything in Python? And oftentimes people already know R and they don't want to learn Python, for example, they might just tell you to keep on using R, and that's fine. That's how the world works. There are so many more languages, by the way, than R and Python, just throughout the world, right? But I think it's also important to consider different things. So if you're in academia, and like I just asked the LLM, by the way, what are the specific benefits to using Python versus R for a geography graduate student? So it gets some answers with Python. We'll start with the benefits of R. So it's no secret that R is better at stats than Python. I don't think that'll change anytime soon. People spend an insane amount of hours making fantastic statistical packages using R. And for a lot of researchers, they've used that for the last 20 or 30 of their papers, or hundreds even, using the same models, that implement the same way. So it might be worth it to stick with R for that specific reason. Having said that, and I think that's a very good reason to stick with R. Like, fantastic, you probably should stick with R if this is the reason why. Or if there's a very specific library that's written for geographic applications that's just in R, or it's natively in R. If you're thinking about just staying in R for visualization, yes, ggplot2 is fantastic, and I know Python's matplotlib and Seaborn aren't perfect, but I don't think that's a reason just to stick with R. So that's at least my opinion by default. Having said that, as far as analyzing large amounts of data, Python is more computationally efficient. It's just true. That's just the way it is. And if you're doing deep learning, Python's going to be better, for sure, 100%. But as you can see here, the LM, what do you choose? The LM might actually give a real answer. It might give a very long-winded answer. It may give Python because a lot of the training data comes from people, let's say like me, that are very Python oriented. Additionally, a lot of these LLMs, the models that they trained on, let me actually share this tab. So everyone's familiar with like Stack Overflow. A lot of Stack Overflow, I'm guessing a good part of their data set came from Stack Overflow, came from Reddit, communities that typically are more, I'd argue, Python happy. There's more Python answers, so people would be more biased toward Python, and therefore the LLMs are more biased toward Python. So that's my opinion on it. It doesn't mean it's true, but as far as data analysis, like large amounts of data, Python's definitely better. I would also preface this with another thing. If you're not using your local machine, because my laptop, for example, has 32 gigabytes of RAM. It has 8 cores. Your laptop may have less, it may have more, but generally personal computers range from a couple gigabytes to, let's say, like 64 gigabytes of RAM, roughly. There's more, there's less, etc. But oftentimes people actually connect to AWS, Azure, clusters at academic institutions because they can't analyze all the data on their local machine. So they just throw more RAM at the problem. And if your issue is that that process is not too slow to analyze the data, then why switch to Python because Python's faster? If it's not that slow to begin with, basically. Yeah, I know that's a long-winded answer.
No, I mean, this is great. I mean, I'm glad that I'm able to kind of facilitate these kinds of conversations.
Okay.
Because yeah, don't apologize for being nuanced, because that's kind of what a lot of this is missing, right? Like it's a very specific answer versus you're human, you can give the context around it.
And you notice also, like, which would you choose? They say that they choose Python as a primary tool. These are basic sort of things. Yeah, it has great integration for this specific package. Is this true? Probably not necessarily true. LMs hallucinate, or these LM systems hallucinate, like ChatGPT 4. But doesn't mean that that's the right answer for you. It doesn't know everything about you. If you put in more information in the prompt, if you give it a more detailed prompt about your specific situation, maybe it would actually give you a great answer because it would know the constraints to give an answer around. That's a really, really important thing too. And I wish people would actually give you more detailed prompts. Like for me, I should have given a more detailed prompt. And I'll share in a second, like a more detailed prompt, kind of like what I'm thinking. But just always consider that, like, prompting is actually a skill, and we didn't do anything crazy here.
Yeah. Well, there's like a whole science to prompt engineering, right?
Yeah, it's a thing. And a lot of my time recently has been spent prompt engineering for some of my research.
Gotcha. All right.
Very
So Christopher said, thanks. Cool to see how different disciplines view different coding languages.
Yeah.
All right, Carly, you ready? I'm going to pull you into the chat. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm good. I see you reacting back in the backstage studio to what Michael's saying. I'm like, all right, let's bring her in so that people can see the reactions. Well, also, too, well, go ahead.
So I was going to say, a lot of the conversations that have been going on are things that I have, like, using ChatGPT to kind of help figure out how to fix code necessarily. Like if an error comes up, asking what this error is and how to fix it. I've noticed that has become a big thing with ChatGPT and trying to figure out that with coding. So I just thought that was interesting that was something that's been brought up with the coding languages and stuff like that.
All right, so Carly, you got an undergraduate degree in econ, right?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, test time. Put you
Awesome.
What is price elasticity, and why would I even care about that?
Price elasticity is the.
Uh-oh.
How to explain it?
Uh-oh.
Give me a second. I got it, guys. I got it. So the price elasticity or something determines how consumers would react if that price changed. So something that is more price elastic, I'm like picturing the model in my head right now for price elasticity, but something that is more elastic as the price changes, it is less it's more likely to change the demand. So if you raise the price of something by like $1, the demand could go down. But if something is very price inelastic, then it will not change the demand as much because it's more of a need. Typically.
All right, I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
That's what's in the textbook.
Yes.
Now I'm gonna double the stakes here and let's bring it into the real world.
Okay.
What do you think is more elastic or inelastic? Bananas or a very high-end liquor Like I think Sam's Club sells one liquor that's like $50,000.
I would say that the liquor is more inelastic. Bananas are more elastic. People don't really. If you're buying something that's high end, you have less substitutes for it because of the quality of the liquor.
All right, fair enough. You know your econ.
I tried.
Well, because I mean, we talk about it in the merchandising department of bananas are commodity.
Yeah.
It's the number one thing that we sell. It's funny because it's like, you know, back in math class, it's like Tom's got 3 apples, Jane's got 5 bananas. But, you know, I mean, we're selling billions of bananas.
Right.
And also, too, like people can just go to the grocery store next door to go get a banana. But if you have a specialty item that only you sell, you get to dictate the price up into a certain degree.
Yeah. It all depends on what you can supplement it with. Because if I go to like Harris Teeter and bananas are $2.99 or something like that, and down the street they're $1.99, I'm gonna go down the street.
Right. Yeah, especially in this economy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and pull back up ChatGPT.
Sure.
And let's see, Michael. I need you to help. I need your help here. I need to see.
Let's see if
how would you go about building that? It doesn't necessarily have to be Python. Python was kind of my first kind of gut feeling. But yeah, if you want to go.
Let me share my entire screen then.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's actually see. So what would you like to build again, just for the audience? Oh, sorry. I need to actually share.
Infinite.
Okay, fine. I'll share it differently. I was hoping to do it where I had like my entire screen, but
yeah.
Let me make it a window.
Or do you have 2 monitors going?
I have none, but maybe I do have extra. Let me see. Is all good?
All right. I'm seeing it now.
Good? Okay, cool. I usually have way too many things open.
You guys can't see my Chrome, but I've got probably 20 tabs. It's a good metaphor for how my mind is right now.
Yeah. Oops. I should hide my desktop. Okay. So that's fine. This is fine. Okay. So you can see I have a lot of things on my desktop, but I don't think anyone really cares. Okay.
All right, we're looking at
ChatGPT
4.
What?
I said we're looking at ChatGPT 4.
Oh, good. That's all you saw? Oh, okay, good. Okay. Okay, I would have been in trouble. Let me just open a Jupyter notebook. There we go. Man. Okay, so I submit research papers all the time.
Yeah.
I do that whole research publishing thing, and if you don't publish, you perish in a pit of flames. And let me see. So elasticity demand model. And I know it doesn't look interesting right now because I'm not showing anything. So demand model.
You're cooking, you're thinking.
I'm seeding into a directory so that no one can see anything on my desktop before I open something.
I've also started commandeering Gen Z lingo, like cooking and no cap.
Okay.
That's good use. Good use of cooking. I'm proud of you for that one.
On God?
Fact.
I feel like the embarrassing uncle.
Okay, so how would I make model give me code to do it?
Wow.
So this is initial, I say return code to do it. Explain your thought process. So I'm letting the model actually determine what language it wants to do it in. So it's giving me some background information. I should note that a lot of these models are very verbose. They give a lot of information. And these are not things I'm super familiar with, right? And I notice that they randomly choose Python. Is it because it's the best option for this? I don't know if it actually is. So usually I do this screen by screen, but I don't have that set up right now, which by the way, means I'm not the best programmer, but I have a Jupyter notebook. You see the Jupyter notebook?
Yeah.
So I'm going to rename it. I'm actually going to make it bigger. So demand elasticity model, just naming it the way I like to name things. So as kind of a refresher, either you know why I chose Python or why I likely chose Python?
Is it because that it's the more commonly used language?
It's probably that.
You said that like GitHub or wherever has a bias towards that.
Yeah, it definitely has a bias toward Python, and it probably has a bias toward, although for a lot of things like coding, there's maybe not too much of a difference between demographic groups, but for a lot of tasks, there probably actually is a difference. So typically, if most of the code is written by, let's say, white males or something, maybe there's not much of a difference between demographics, but for a lot of other tasks, there might be. So the bias over here is that most code is probably written in Python, or a lot of the most popular things for data analysis. Doesn't mean it can't be done in R. Maybe it's not. Maybe it could be better.
Yeah.
But it's something we should really consider and think about before you do it. So the first thing I did is I just want to like make an organized notebook. So John David task, price list, demand elasticity model. Where's the price
elasticity?
Ooh, okay. So elasticity model. So price elasticity model.
I think price or demand elasticity is. I mean, Carly, you're an expert on this now. You just got a degree. You tell us.
I don't know that I would say expert necessarily. Price is more so on the supply side. Demand is, I mean.
Ooh. So we have change in quantity demanded over change in price. Is that actually correct?
Yeah.
For an elasticity model, yes.
Okay. So that's also very important. So we have an equation. And by the way, this actually was latex. Like this is latex, right? So let me make sure that this thing over here before the parentheses, let me see if I can remove that red that's ugly. Before the parentheses. So I have a nice equation here. So price elasticity model. One thing I do like about Jupyter is that it's nice that I can have kind of this. I can have my I can have my markdown. I can have something specifically more latex related. So I have my like a header and I have my equation there. And I know this is not interesting like watching someone code, but
no, it is honestly.
But you see demand requirements, you see elasticity calculation. So there's a couple of things over here. And note as a general rule, sometimes the code will actually work and sometimes it won't. But the one thing I want to note here is I don't actually have a data set. So if I would actually see how this works, because you're a domain expert, right? Both of you are domain experts in this. Me, not even the slightest.
Yeah.
The one thing to consider here is how I actually install these models, or sorry, these libraries. So what I'll do over here is if I actually put this into my notebook, it's not going to run. Can anyone guess what the error is going to be? There'll be actually probably 2, depending.
Is it that there's no like? Well, Carly, you go.
I mean, let's go line by line.
Let me see it as well. So let me try and look at this.
Well, I was going to say, because it doesn't, you have to load the library, right? So it has like the specific, I don't even know how it works.
It has out of the code. So you don't know if I actually install these libraries. I can tell you for a fact I've installed pandas. Okay. I'm not sure if I have actually installed stats models, but there'll be another error as I go down here, for sure.
Okay. There's no data, right?
Load the data set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the data set?
There is none. There is no data to be inputted.
Yeah, so they'll probably say something about like, I want you to, give me a data set, but did it actually say, assume this is for your data set? It didn't actually do that. And a lot of people, they'll get very discouraged when they get the following error. This file doesn't exist, basically, will be the error. Do I even have stats models? I actually don't have stats models available. Oh, I actually do. I did have stats models in this current environment that I activated before I ran this notebook. So what you see here is error to no such file or directory. So if I actually type this in, it'll tell me use it for your own data. Well, a lot of people don't know how to do this. So if I just type in the error, it actually will tell you, oh, can find the file. To resolve this, make sure you provide the correct file path. I don't have this file. It's going down a loophole. But if I want to actually put on the right path, what I could do is tell it, I don't have this file. Have this file. Please generate one for me. That is useful for this task. So
why did you add that last bit to it?
What?
Why did you add that last bit?
Well, it could just give me a random CSV file that is not really relevant for the model that you wanted me to create.
Gotcha. So it doesn't imply things? Like you have to be...
It could. It's a very good model, but why make the task harder?
Right.
Like, why are we playing the world on difficult mode? So I'm just going to randomly click on the link and assume it's the right data set. So, and for me, it might be, you're still seeing my window. Let me actually move the file that you see in the window into that folder, because that's actually very important to me.
Hey, Carly, will you hold down the fort? I've got to run to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's so exciting. You got someone running the bathroom here. Okay. So, and then what we find out over here is I had that error here. Mm-hmm. And one thing I noticed in Jupyter, especially if you're learning to code, it's good to make more cells. And cells are basically these little coding things I have. This is one cell. This is another cell. This is another cell. So I do escape A. I want to make a cell above. And I'm basically just slowly chopping my code up into pieces because I'm not a Python expert. I could make some error in between. So, and we're also assuming the rest of this code is actually correct. And so partly why it's not perfect to learn how to code like this is that the LLM still made a mistake, assuming that it had this data. It said path to your data, but I clearly didn't have that data. So, and now I download the file, and this file is normally going to be my downloads folder. I moved it to my desk, the same folder as this, by the way, but it requires a little bit of information to be able to locate this file. I moved the file I downloaded to the same directory as this Jupyter notebook I made, but it could still be a bit of a challenge. So I found this, and by the way, this is escaping to my terminal. I'm using a Mac for this demonstration. So ls basically just shows me all the current files in my current working directory. In this case, if I was using a Windows, I'd use dir and Jupyter.
Oh, interesting.
Linux would also be ls as well. So I have this data. I'm going to rename this file. And as we see here, is it going to be perfect? I don't know. We'll see. So this is data, synthetic data that they generated for me. I have price, I have quantity. And this is a pandas data frame. And of course, the one thing we kind of understand so far is that I have a Python library here. A lot of people here may not even know pandas. They may not know stats models. They may not know what this output is. It's basically a specific pandas data type that's useful to work with data. It's called the data frame. And R, it's similar. So I can see different columns, but one thing I want to mention here is that I have the price and I have the quantity column. And then in this code below, it's referring to the intercept column because it's creating an intercept column and putting it all ones. So it'll be another column it's going to be adding. And then I'll subset the intercept column and the price column into a variable X. And then data quantity Y. I'm fitting a ordinary least squares model. This is very similar to a regression. It's a regression model, like typical regression model. And I have price and I have quantity. So this code might work out assuming that it's using stats models correctly. And we'll see how it goes.
That's interesting. So it's able to create the code in order to make the model, but you need to still have that kind of deeper level of understanding to be able to like fix it to what you want it to be instead of just throwing it in there.
Yeah, and then also keep in mind, I don't understand price elasticity models very well either. I'm a PhD student in machine learning. I work in like a finance lab, but doesn't mean I know this off the top of my head because my research and day-to-day life is not based on this. You know this far better than I do, like far better. You're the expert here. So it's up to someone like you to be able to interpret these results. I can actually put these results into ChatGPT and try to get an understanding, but it's very good at coming up with answers that seem real. Doesn't mean they're actually true. So if I put these results from this model and I ask it to explain it to me, maybe they'll explain something, but it's really up to someone like you that knows what they're talking about to be able to understand it and also to share it with other humans. Because if I just give this response, maybe it's not useful. I don't know. Because I have to know what's useful in this results.
Right.
So I have to ask specifically what results I'm interested in. So dependent variable, the model is quantity. Sure. R squared, this is a very bad model. So 27.7% of variability in quantity can be explained by the model. Is that good for this sort of task? Do you know?
I mean, the variability in quantity is just kind of, it's kind of interesting with economic models because you have to use like actual historical data, and specifically with price elasticity, it has less to do with the actual, I would say, statistics behind it, if that makes sense, because it's more of a conceptual practice that you'd have to use historical data for. So I think it is interesting that it had all of the statistics laid out that way as well, or that it doesn't quite give the full information on why this would be good or why this would be bad, because I feel like ChatGPT, especially with learning things, has kind of been seen as an AI tool that is all-knowing. And that, I mean, as you guys had talked about earlier, that would replace jobs.
We're not quite there yet.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing this in like a real time and understanding what's behind the elasticity model and versus how ChatGPT is spitting it out, it's more of a realization for me specifically that it's not always entirely correct, you know?
Yeah. And this model interpretation could be, useful, but because I don't know things off the top of my head, or at least some people listening might not, or whatever, it means that you still have to be a domain expert, which you are. Like you just got out of school, you know what you're talking about. But for someone like me that I don't do this on a daily basis, I would struggle to interpret this, or the statistics is actually relevant for this use case. Is it relevant for the business? Because it all depends on the very specific use case that you're working with and the context that you're working with. So that's also why, while this is great and we got the code to work, we created a price elasticity model. We had some error here, and then we got them to generate some synthetic data. That's cool. That's awesome. It laid out things nicely. It had some nice comments. And then it did the default output of stats models, but wasn't actually useful. Right. And so that's kind of one thing I want to do, but clearly you understood it better than the LLM in some regards, like the context. So
right.
That's
what I miss.
Yeah, but it's still useful as a tool, because coding it from scratch, you'd have to Google it or figure it out or whatever. But it's more of a human in the loop, so to speak.
Right. And speaking as a student who has used ChatGPT for clarification on things, I think I've kind of noticed with the clarifying, it helps to explain some things on maybe a deeper level than just going back into the notes and like knowing what the professor told you and stuff like that. But it still doesn't quite get everything correct. Like from my experience using it, there have been things that I have input and I've gotten the output of it, and it wasn't entirely what I thought was going on. And I was like, that seemed completely correct. So it's very interesting to see that be such a, because it is such a tool. There's still so many things about it that are so good with stuff like that, but there's certain little tweaks that aren't quite there yet.
Yeah, it's not 100% there, and also to get it 100% there, like further, it's hard. Not sure to give an opinion like this on a podcast, but whatever. It doesn't matter. If I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble. But if you've noticed recently, GPT-4 came out when? Does anyone know? Top of your head? I'll Google it. GPT-4 release date. It's been a long time. So that was March 14th, 2023. For a while there, they're releasing models all the time. Like the top model, the most impressive models released all the time. But to improve beyond GPT-4, unless they release something really soon, it's been a while since the top model's gone much better. People are still improving, but we've hit maybe some scaling laws with data or the model architecture, which is like the machine learning models that power these things. They haven't had the massive advances to be able to make the applications that much better. And training these models takes a very long time to train them. So I'm not sure it'll get better that much anytime soon, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah. This will be the tool for a while. And things can change tomorrow. But right now, it's been since March 14th, 2023. That's a long time ago.
I've got the hiccups. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
I have the hiccups.
You have a nice shirt, though. It's important.
Okay. So, Carly, I want you share your screen and go ahead and pull up LinkedIn.
LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Right,
also, we got a question. If I can get it out between hiccups. How large is a large data set?
It depends on your use case. But for me, I consider a large data set when I can't work with it on my local computer.
Okay.
That's what I consider large, because that means I have to load the data differently. I have to train my models differently in some cases. That's what I consider large. And then really large is something that I can't feasibly work with it with the compute resources I possess. So,
gotcha.
Or like have access to, even like it'd be tedious to work with on the cloud, like.
Yeah. Well, and what I ran into recently is I've gotten into Ultra. Man, these hiccups are killing me. I've gotten into Ultrix, and I've never done this before, but I reached the limit of Excel. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to export. I was trying to export 6 million rows, and it literally sent me an error and said, Excel can't handle this. So I think what I'm going to have to do is use Access maybe, which is such a, that's the tool that's available to me, I think. But
yeah, you also got to think, I'm sure you've already done this because you're more the business person than I am. But do you really need to export that much data into Excel?
So I can't get specific about this, but I'm basically building out a minimum viable product of a BI tool internally.
I see.
So it's a duct tape intermediary solution.
I see. Yeah,
to get to something bigger. Which what I'm struggling with is kind of what we were talking. I was being a little self-deprecating and being like, I'm stumbling through all this. I'm trying to get over the vernacular gap because I taught, being a professor and also consulting, like I use very specific, accurate terms.
Yeah.
And then they're like, they're like, what? What are you saying? And I realized like, it's like, I'm going from one world to another and I need to like code switch, so to speak, professionally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, Carly, go ahead and pull up LinkedIn.
Everybody see that okay?
Yeah, this is going to get a little bit meta for a second. So go over to my profile, or just type in. I better be the last person on your search.
I'm sure you are.
No, because I saw you viewed me a few hours ago.
Wow.
I know it's hard being this admired. So
Okay.
So scroll down. Oh man, it's taking a second to load.
Yeah, I know. It's the Wi-Fi.
So scroll down further. Further. Keep going. Desktop there. So this is a new section on your profile on LinkedIn, and you can add projects. So this is where it gets a little bit meta. So Carly, what I want you to do is explain how we're leveraging AI for our podcast. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit that clip and post it unlisted on YouTube. And then I want you to put that under your projects, like you presenting this to Michael.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing LinkedIn for a second so that I can go over and
Michael,
share.
you're smiling. Is this?
I like someone else on the spot. That's nice.
I'm really good at that. Just being, and it's funny because like now when I'm working, like I am the one being put on the spot.
So, this is kind of the general dashboard of Riverside. There's a lot of things that you can do in Riverside. There's this record button here. There's upload, edit, and you see this AI voice. So this is the first bit of AI that I think is very interesting, because AI voice, you can create the captions and then automatically layer them through AI, just throwing the voice on top of it if you're wanting to edit like a silent video that just has edited captions on it. So specifically what we're doing with this podcast, I'll click on one of these to show. So these are all of the uploaded clips that we have in Riverside right now. And the goal is to create clips that are able to be transferred over to social media. So social media sites such as Shorts on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all that kind of stuff, and kind of following the format that they go into. What's really interesting about Riverside is that it creates clips for you. So where you see Magic Clip, it has automatically gone through the entire 53-ish minutes of this video and has picked out what it thinks is the highlights. And it will create those videos for you. What you can also do with it is the full episode. You can clean up the entire episode, add captions. You can take out pauses. So if I were to go into one of these, might take a second to load again, but we'll get there. Okay, so on the side here, when it loads over to the left, it'll show all of the transcript for this entire episode. And as you can see, the parts that are crossed out are the parts that are not in this AI-generated clip. So what I can do, because as we've discussed a little bit throughout the podcast, AI is not perfect. If I see something that's in the transcript that I like better than what AI has picked, I still have the ability to go through and edit this AI clip to the point of me liking it and liking the content that's involved in it. So kind of what goes along with that, and it's taking so long to load right now, and I'm not sure why, but you can throw captions on these videos. So AI generates the captions, and you can look at the style that you want it to be in, and all that kind of stuff. And then they also have this AI producer. So the AI producer allows you to set the pace, which I think is very interesting. It has suggestions for long form versus short form as well. So with the short form, it removes the ums, the uhs, the awkward pauses that may be in it. Just
yeah.
the pace is a little bit faster, and the clips, you're able to fit more content in a shorter clip. But it kind of leaves it in for the longer form so that it's more of a natural flow. You can do layouts on here, smooth the speech, removing filler words, and muting mics, and you get to enhance audio tracks, and you can add audio tracks onto here. You can add music, all that kind of stuff, and you can even change the orientation. So with us specifically editing it for social media, I currently have it set to what the format would be to post it on YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and TikToks, but I can also change it to the better form that it would be for YouTube, for Spotify, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, besides Reels and that kind of stuff. And so the AI that's involved in doing that, it's as we were talking about earlier, where it takes the content that you have already uploaded and finds ways to improve it instead of just creating the content on its own.
Gotcha. Can you I guess it's still loading, isn't it?
Well, we're using a lot of bandwidth with StreamYard, I'm guessing.
Probably.
And then on top of that, you're doing a video application. So
yeah, it already this thing already heats up my Mac just as Riverside, but that's because my Mac is old. So but yeah, it does use a lot of bandwidth. But
gotcha. Yeah. Well, so as far as how this plugs into the business and the strategy, I brought in one of my former students to be kind of my analyst, and then Carly here is the marketing manager. So the goal is by October 1st to have 90 AI generated clips, and then we're going to batch schedule all these out. And it's really interesting to me in that I've started to think critically about my own social media consumption behavior. And there was this podcast called the Modern Wisdom Podcast. You know, it's a little broy. It's like bro science, but it's funny because I stopped listening because they started saying the same thing over and over again. But then they had a really interesting guest last week, and I got hit with 3 separate clips about the same conversation. And then I was like, all right, fine, I'm going to go check it out. And now they've rehooked me and re-engaged me because now I've gone and listened to 3 episodes. So it's so funny how meta this is. Like, we're on a podcast talking about podcast strategy. But I mean, this is a great opportunity for you, Carly, to, number one, you're on the bleeding edge with like using these tools for marketing. If you wanted to get a marketing analytics or a marketing specialist job, you know, after you graduate, I think you're going to be able to hit the ground running, especially because we've got a year before you're going to be finished.
Yes. Yeah.
She'll be on a lot of social media.
There is, well, it's looking through jobs now as a graduate student, and especially because I've kind of bounced around on, you can do analytics in marketing, you can do analytics in supply chain, you can do analytics in financials, different areas of business. And since I've been bouncing around with job searches and stuff like that, marketing specifically, there are so many social media marketing jobs that are getting posted out there because it is something that is ever growing. And especially with TikTok, the numbers that you see and the amount of an audience that you reach is something that's so important to these businesses and to stuff like this podcast, and being able to get the audience that you want for this podcast, or reach out and show people that something like this content exists.
Yeah, there's a lot of jobs in it. I totally agree. And
it's the essence of our time. We're currently in the late stage social media era where it's everything now. All the brands trying to be funny and hip. Hot to a girl. Like how is that a thing? But here, let me bump you right fast and then show you the studio, our YouTube studio. Oh man, you're right, Michael. It is much slower. So we've started a beta test or kind of soft launch some of these ideas on this main channel. But if you take a look at the analytics, it's pretty striking. I mean, look at that huge surge in viewership that we got.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, it is a lot more attention, but it's lower quality attention. So I'm not sure that a view here is necessarily as rich as a view from here or here.
Yeah.
That being said, though, it's like top of the market, top of the funnel marketing. So like it's excellent in terms of like an awareness campaign that, you know, gets people into our funnel, then to the podcast. And then, I mean, I guess the bottom of our funnel is we're going after sponsorships now, which, you know, I guess just to be fully transparent, I've made around $102,000 off this podcast.
That's
through
good.
selling the career services program. So it works. And especially like with this, it's almost like a product placement, you know,
Yes.
like if you want to be Carly, just sign up for my career services program. We're no longer offering it. Just because, I mean, this is part of what I like really nerd out on is when I really doubled down and hired, you know, a full team to launch this program, we had a direct competitor enter the market at a quarter of our price, guaranteeing the same thing. But it really soured the entire market because, of course, it didn't work out for them. And then a month later, a lot of those people that I pitched and then the competitor pitched came back, but now they're out $500 and a month more desperate because they don't have a job.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, you know what? I made quite a bit of money for that 2-year run. It's time to pull out of that market because it's not, I don't want to be, well, also from an ethical standpoint, I don't want to take money from people who are in dire straits because that feels a little scammy. Right. Because surprisingly, they are the easiest demographic, I think, to swindle out of money because they need like a Hail Mary play to get back. And then, I just don't want to be, because it's a little slimy what they did because they put in the fine print. If you do our program for 2 weeks, you get no refund. So, so now that I'm dealing with people who have been exposed to that or brought into that funnel, and it's like, I'm out. I'll just go get a job. Like you were saying earlier, like there's easier. I don't know if this was, you know, in our chat before we went live or after, but you were saying that like going and getting a job is probably easier than making money as an influencer or through social media.
Through social media, specifically on things like this, like about how to get a job or even teaching data analytics or Python or whatever. Yeah, there's opportunities for that, but specifically getting a job, everyone has their own opinions. It's almost like a religious belief in some ways about how to get a job. Some people think the only way to get a job is through referral.
Right.
Absolutely only way. It doesn't matter what my skills or anything or passing an interview. It's just a referral. If you give me a referral, I can get a job tomorrow. Just give me a shot and I'll get an interview and get a job. That's not what it is. So right off the bat, you have people that will not watch or engage their content or listen because of that. Right. And then it's about like how to get an analytics job or how to get a data job or whatever. Then it's a smaller funnel. Plus your content is a lot more thoughtful, I'd argue, than a lot of other people. So it requires a lot more preparation. You can't just watch a movie and give a review. That's
right.
Probably easier because that already has marketing from that movie. Like I love pitch meetings, like Ryan George's pitch meetings. And if you know what those are, they're hilarious. But people often used to watch the pitch meetings because they're already familiar with the movie. Like people like pitch a movie and they basically makes fun of the movie premise, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why I think it's very hard making a job in this space without being unethical. A lot of people haven't been ethical, and those are the ones that made money. If you Google certain people, you'll see that they've come under scandal, overpromise, underdeliver, all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've kind of reconceptualized the podcast because I started doing this just for my own edification.
Yeah.
There was no plan to monetize this. It was more of just like, I want to learn more about the industry. So I started reaching out to people, and it's kind of crazy to think about. Like maybe there was the analytics power hour down in Australia, but I was like the second or third person to do this, which is really weird when you think about it. Like there are millions of people that work in data, but like very few of them have a podcast. And even the ones who did have a podcast, 99.9% of them didn't get past episode 5 or 10 or 15.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. But I see the podcast though as a way for me to kind of build a stronger pipeline.
Yeah, but the direct money from the actual like podcast, I don't know what is. You can make money easier. I know you. I know both of you. You can make money easier, like for sure.
Right.
It builds your brand. That's very important. Your online presence is super important. That's why we know each other, really. But and that's also how we run opportunities. And that's also what helped me with some other jobs, the paper, the YouTube, the LinkedIn Learning stuff. It all helps. Especially now where people have a lot of fake things on their resume. It's a real visual thing you can see.
Well, yeah, I'm seeing it as kind of a conduit. Like I'm getting to have a conversation with you, Michael, who we've been friends for years at this point.
Yeah.
Bring Carly into this conversation. She's getting value because this has created a job for her that has a tangible impact that she can then, by the time she graduates, have something substantial to point to and say, hey, this is real. It's not like I was literally pitching a supervised internship idea to the head of the Chamber of Commerce in downtown Greensboro. And I was like, the way the pitch was like, there are 2 types of internships. There are the really good ones where you have a manager who likes mentoring and has the bandwidth and has the opportunity in a specific project. And then there's others where it's almost like babysitting and there's nothing to do. And you're actually just a drain on the entire organization. And then like the business model could be, the Chamber of Commerce, they've got 1,400 businesses. We put an analytics expert in place. They meet once a week, and then the student does the work, but then has a supervision of someone who's like experienced, and that potentially could scale. But yeah, it's there is a lot of like kind of Carly. What I've noticed about your generation is how skeptical you guys are. You see something, you immediately disbelieve it. And as a millennial, I need to get better at that. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. Oh, awesome. And I'm just.
Well, it's really funny that you say that because my generation is the generation that grew up. I mean, I'm 22 years old. We grew up with social media. I have been online since I was 11 years old. Yeah. Like it has been forever. And especially now, I know we were talking about AI generated videos earlier. Seeing stuff like that, we see it and we can call it out immediately. And so when it comes to seeing stuff online, since we have that ability to call out and things are just continuously getting better, we're always skeptical. And there's this whole conversation right now, especially with grad students, of fake job postings. It's a big thing. There are so many. I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll look through the jobs and I'll be like, is that a real company? Like I have to go and open a new tab to research the company to make sure that they're even real. Yeah. So it's stuff like that. That's why we've become so skeptical that it's so many things are becoming fake because technology's progressed so far.
Yeah. Well, it's also cyclical too. Like you guys are wearing bell bottoms and like wearing mullets. Also, too, it seems like there's some cyclicality in social media in that LinkedIn feels like Instagram in 2010.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of really hot women like doing these thoughtful poses, or they're traveling Europe, and it's so weird. It feels so hokey to me.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's getting a huge amount of engagement, and I know that they're making money off of it. So, yeah, that I'm leaning on you and Craig, the youngins, to make sure I'm not cringe.
Well, it's funny too, becoming a marketing manager for a podcast and working on getting content out there. But this is content that I consume every day. I could not tell you the amount of podcast clips I get on my TikTok feed in a day. And so everything that I'm doing, since social media is so new and it's taught in marketing classes as just a form of marketing, like they don't go in any depth because it's so subjective, that it's weird to be creating content based on what I enjoy instead of like what's supposed to be done, you know?
Yeah, well, in a
There's
year,
no guideline in place of how I'm supposed to be doing it or how I'm supposed to be editing this.
well, in a year's time, when you graduate with an MBA from UNCG, we'll hire you at Greensboro College, and you can be our marketing.
Hey, I've loved it so far. I've had so much fun with it and playing around with the AI and stuff like that. It's been a good time.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've been prattling on for an hour and 36 minutes. Michael, it's been great. I genuinely enjoy our conversation each and every time that we get to talk.
Yeah, I miss chatting. Hopefully we can be back in person eventually.
Yeah.
Because, I like this. This is fun, but hopefully we see each other back somewhere in person. So
That's true. I mean, you're in Atlanta, so you're not that far away. I think it's
maybe I'll schedule a trip to Greensboro or something. So.
Yeah. Please do come. We'll have like a whole meetup.
Yeah,
actually, I can host you in the auditorium in Greensboro College, and we can give like a whole talk. Yeah, that's in the pipeworks or pipeline. Pipeworks. Okay. It's been a long day. It's been a 12-hour.
I'll let you guys go. Or
all right. Go. Well, thank you so much, Carly. Great job.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody who joined in on the live stream. See ya.
Bye, everyone.